weeks, the people of Mexico will head to the polls to elect a new president. The outcome will have wide-ranging impacts in my home state of Arizona and the entire United States. Arizona, America, and Mexico's fates are intertwined, not just as geographic neighbors, but as strategic partners in tackling increased global migration, illicit fentanyl trafficking, and water scarcity on both sides of the border. There are incredible opportunities before us. Mexico recently overtook China to become America's largest trading partner as President Biden and congressional leaders work to bring advanced manufacturing back to the U.S. Nearshoring supply chain components in Mexico and Latin America becomes all the more critical, particularly for national security. Secretary Blinken, I have a few questions about the outcome of the Mexican elections and how they might impact U.S.-Mexico relationship, and I ask you to keep your answers brief for timeliness. First, a record number of migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border has severely strained Arizona's state and local resources. We have to reestablish operational control of the southern border, and Mexico needs to do a lot more to manage U.S.-bound migration. Mr. Secretary, how does the department intend to work with the new Mexican government to limit migrants transiting through the country?
We're already working intensely with the current government. That will continue under the next government, whatever it is. We've seen a decrease in migrant encounters from Mexico since December, going down from about 11 or 12,000 to 4 or 5,000. We want to do even more. And by the way, I think the bill that currently before Congress would be an important step in that direction.
We hope that bill gets a hearing on our side of the Capitol. Illicit fentanyl is devastating American communities, almost all of it produced by Mexican drug cartels with precursor chemicals imported from China. A fact the current president of Mexico has repeatedly refused to acknowledge. Tough diplomacy brought China back to the negotiating table last year on this critical issue. How will the department work with the incoming Mexican administration to halt the import of Chinese precursor chemicals?
Again, we've been working intensely with the current Mexican government on that. We've seen increased collaboration in terms of trying to bust up the criminal cartels, the enterprises on the Mexican side of the border. We've seen enhancements to the border itself in terms of screening technology to try to catch the fentanyl before it gets across the border. We have a whole-of-government approach. We're not only engaging the Mexican law enforcement authorities, but the regulatory authorities and others to make sure that their own companies are not engaged in the illicit diversion of these chemical precursors. And I have to say, I think the cooperation has increased significantly, and of course we want to do even more, and that will continue, that needs to continue, irrespective of the new government.
A secure global semiconductor supply chain is essential to the success of domestic investments made under the CHIPS Act. I've introduced H.R. 8414, the Bipartisan Semiconductor Supply Chain Security and Diversification Act, to promote investment in a regional semiconductor ecosystem in Latin America. There are ample opportunities for the United States and other foreign companies to nearshore operations in Mexico, particularly in the semiconductor supply chain. However, I've heard from CEOs of major corporations concerned about the threat of violence and extortion from Mexican drug cartels, which President López Obrador has not adequately confronted. How will the State Department encourage the new Mexican administration to counter the drug cartel's violent crime and reassure American businesses evaluating the viability of Mexico as a nearshoring destination?
We've made exactly that argument to the current government, which is there's a tremendous opportunity, exactly as you've described, to nearshore, to have Mexico be a critical part of the supply chain. But the business environment itself, including the regulatory environment, and making sure that the private sector can do what it needs to do is critical. And yes, the security environment is critical as well.
Finally, water security is critical to the desert Southwest, and Mexico has been a key partner on the Colorado River. While Mexico's recent commitment to additional water conservation is helpful, we simply cannot solve this crisis without a long-term solution that ensures cuts are shared among all basin users, including our friends in Mexico. Mr. Secretary, what steps is the U.S. taking to make sure Mexico will share in the pain and conserve the water necessary to protect the system in the long term?
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that, and we've been very much engaged on that. They're not meeting their water delivery commitments to the United States under the 1944 treaty that we have, as you know well and have been very engaged on. Delivering right now the amount of water at the 3-year mark of their 5-year commitment is way below where it needs to be, and it's unlikely they can meet what they need to do by the end of the 5 years. We've engaged intensely on this, including recently with President López Obrador, with the foreign minister. I saw her just a couple of weeks ago on this. The officials, the state officials in Tamaulipas and Chihuahua and we want to see this get done. It's imperative that it happen. They also, I think, have told us that their own elections may be what's an impediment to getting this done. The elections are June the 2nd, so let's see where we are after June the 2nd.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize my